Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast, brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. It's our Monday afternoon live show. I am Marc Givler, joined by Kevin Noon. The transfer portal is open, and all sorts of names are flying into the portal. I think we're closing in on 1,000 names already in the transfer portal, with several more to come here in the coming days. Ohio State's going to be active. How active? We're going to find out, but we know for sure they're going to be looking for offensive linemen. We suspect they're going to be looking for a couple other things as well, but that'll play out here over the next few weeks as they also try and figure out who they're retaining. Kevin, first news item of the portal for Ohio State is that they will be hosting Northwestern offensive line transfer Josh Thompson here on Friday for a visit. Thompson is a honorable mention All Big Ten offensive lineman, has experience at guard and tackle. Kevin, I guess this was probably not surprising. I think it was talked about, a few days ago that this was going to be a guy that Ohio State was going to look at, and now the visit is set up. But Thompson's kind of more guard than tackle. He has experience at both, but he's a little more guard than tackle. What does that tell you about maybe what their plans are next year with Carson Hinsman?
Well, I'll start with that this kind of fits into the plan that I thought that we were going to see of Ohio State getting a combo guy, even if Thompson, I mean, they haven't landed Thompson, but going and getting a combo guy and then maybe getting somebody who is strictly a tackle, because they need two offensive linemen in this portal class. So as for Hinsman, I still think that the goal would be to try and get him in the center mix, and he's going to have to be able to hold off Josh Padilla. I mean, we don't have the benefit of knowing what Ohio State's line is going to look like in the next 1 to 4 games. I think we can all agree that there will be some changes. I think there needs to be some changes. You need to have your best 5 out there. Ohio State's inability to run the ball the last couple of games, Ohio State's inability to really protect Will Howard in the last game, I think all predicate that. So I'm not going to get ahead of myself and try and predict what I think the line is going to look like. I'm pretty sure Ryan Day and Justin Fry and Chip Kelly don't know what the line is going to look like, but they better figure that out quickly, because December 21st is rapidly approaching. But I think that you still sit there and want to have open competition. We have seen Ohio State go out and get portal guys who have not been able to lock down their jobs. Jahad Carter was somebody like that. I mean, those things do happen. They do exist. So it's not an indictment of Carson Hinsman. It's not that Ohio State is ready to move on, but I think that you need to, when you sit there and you look at the guard position, and if we're still considering Donovan Jackson a guard and he leaves after this year, and you have a group of guards that include Tegra, Austin Sareveld, Carson Hinsman. I mean, Hinsman has the ability to slide into center. So, I think there are a lot of options on the table, and I think that helps Ohio State.
Yeah, I think that's going to be part of the interesting thing with this process with the portal is, what do they want to do with Hinsman next year? Because if you're moving him to center, you probably do need a guard in the portal, because quite frankly, like, Saraveld's had his moments of good play. Tegra's been okay, but I wouldn't say either of those guys have played to the level that you don't consider bringing someone in to push the competition, at least. So, and then if Hinsman stays at guard, you may be looking for a center. Even if you like Josh Padilla, we don't know anything about Josh Padilla yet. And, it's not exactly an area of great depth on the roster right now. So you got to figure that's going to play into it. And again, my best guess would be at this point that they spend the offseason trying to make Hinsman their center, which means the snapping needs to improve. But that would be my guess. And then they can fill in the guard tackle situations with portal guys. But we'll see how that plays out. Again, Thompson has guard and tackle experience. I did talk to Josh a little bit today. He told me that, because I asked him, like, guard, tackle, what do you think? And he just said, like, he's being told different things from different teams, and basically, he's a plug and play at whichever spot a team needs him at. So Ohio State's no different with that. So the flexibility there is nice. Honorable mention all Big Ten. While it maybe doesn't get people super excited, he did play at Northwestern, and a lot of times you can kind of fly under the radar at those types of programs in terms of award voting. So I think, I wouldn't get too wrapped up either way into that, but definitely a guy that would make some sense, I think, for Ohio State. So we'll see what happens Friday. He's got a bunch of other visits. When these offensive linemen come into the portal, it's like the market is the supply is so low and the demand is so high that pretty much any starting caliber offensive lineman in the portal is going to get all sorts of interest and offers. So he's getting a lot of interest right now. But so that's kind of the big news item. I wanted to hit on something. I talked about this in my Skull Session column on the website this morning, which you can check out at buckeyehuddle.com if you want to hear a little bit more on this, or a little bit just read more about Ohio State recruiting and state championship recaps and portal stuff and a new quarterback target to watch. We're going to tease that one. I'm not going to give that away here, but new quarterback target very much surging right now for the Buckeyes. So check that out at buckeyehuddle.com. But the one thing I do want to hit on, because we are talking transfer portal right now, is Keon Keeley has been this huge name for Ohio State fans. They've tried to wish him into the portal for 2 years now. I believe he's going to be in the portal in the very near future, but this is Riley Leonard 2.0. I talked to a very good source in the last 24 hours who said that if Keeley goes in the portal, look for it to be Notre Dame, and look for it to be Notre Dame pretty quickly. So that's what I'm hearing there. So if the graphic comes out on Twitter today or tomorrow or whatever, that Keon Keeley's in the transfer portal, I wouldn't be betting a lot on Ohio State being the destination there. That said, I do think they'd be in the market for a pass rusher.
Yeah.
Now they've got to retain their guys. I mean, there's two key areas of retention, in my opinion, on this team right now. And that's defensive line and defensive back. We kind of know what the offensive line is going to be, as far as we know who's leaving, we know who's staying. We generally know what the wide receiver room is going to look like. The D-line room is going to be interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of guys in that 2 deep that feel like they probably should have played more this year. So how much of that is going to play into retention costs and things like that, I don't know. But that's an area they're going to have to shore up with retention. And defensive back's another interesting one, because I do think they're going to come at Davison Igbinosun with an enticing don't go to the NFL yet type of NIL offer. Now, will he take that? I don't know. But I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch there. And then you've got some backup corners who you expect to possibly either move into the starting lineup or compete to move into the starting lineup. Your guys like Jermaine Matthews, your guys like Aaron Scott. There's going to be some guys there who are going to be, the poachers are going to be out in full force on guys like that. So that's going to be an area to shore up as well. So part of this is going to be what they pursue, but the other part of this is going to be kind of how they're able to retain that next wave of players. So we'll see what happens here the next few days, next few weeks. Going to be interesting. Portal's always crazy. Already a couple names that I found interesting, Kevin, in the portal. But, where do you think, obviously offensive line, we've beat that one to death, but what are some other areas you think Ohio State could maybe be aggressive in the portal?
Running back, kicker. I would take a swing at a linebacker. You've lost Gabe Powers already. I mean, you just kind of have to see what happens there. I mean, they're going to have to bring in another body at quarterback. I mean, Devin Brown has announced that he will enter the portal. He's going to remain for the rest of the season. But Ohio State is losing one quarterback, could lose two, could in theory lose three. So you're going to have to bring in a quarterback. I mean, there's going to be a lot of necessity. I mean, everybody that doesn't like Ohio State went round and round about how Ohio State went out and spot a team, which couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, it was, once again, just, haters going to hate and trying to say stuff. But I think Ohio State will bring in more transfer players this year than last year. It's not going to be Colorado levels. It's not going to be 70 or anything like that, but I can see it pushing a dozen. I really could. With the new numbers in terms of what scholarships are going to be, and Mark and I are both friends with somebody who just loves texting and yelling at me. It's like, it's never going to be 105. Nobody's going to go to 105. So I just got to take the 105 lexicon out of my vocabulary and not say that, but more than 85. I think you can get away with that. And again, if Ohio State, who's got the third best odds, according to several books, to win the college football playoff, if Ohio State wins it, and that's a big if, because we all remember what the last indelible image of Ohio State on the field was, and it was crap. But you could see a lot of turnover. So Ohio State is going to have to be active. And we already are seeing people here in the chat, over on the Buckeye Huddle, on Huddle message board, everything already locking in on their favorite names for kids that have been in the portal for 16 minutes. But that's, it's just another level of recruiting.
Yeah, I agree. They definitely need to go get a kicker. I already saw some stuff in the chat. Look, I know it's out there on Quinshon Judkins. Do I think Ohio State will put together a very enticing NIL package to maybe get Quinshon Judkins to consider coming back? Yeah, I think they probably will. But I kind of need to see it to believe it with Judkins coming back. I know that was not the plan going into the season. Plans change. The one thing I will say about this year is it is an elite running back draft, not just in terms of top end guys, but depth. I think there's like 7 or 8 running backs that I think most years would go in like the first couple of rounds. And so some of those guys may not, just because of supply and demand and all that stuff. So there's some stuff there, but I'm not buying that yet. So we'll see. Something to keep an eye on, but I got to kind of see that one to believe it, just because I know what the goal was coming into the year. Pass rusher, yeah. Again, got to see what you keep first. I don't think they really need a receiver, like from a talent infusion standpoint, but they're still kind of low on numbers. So I wonder if they would bring in someone like that, but we'll see about that. Obviously, running back, if Judkins leaves, they'd like to bring in a veteran to pair with like James Peoples for next year. And linebacker, Kevin mentioned, is interesting. Here's an interesting name. I don't have anything on this yet. I have no idea if Ohio State's going to get involved here. So I'm not reporting this as like news or anything, but a name that caught my eye this morning was Jaden Yates from Marshall at linebacker. He's got 3 years left. He was first team all Sun Belt this year as a redshirt freshman, second-year player. He's from Gahanna Lincoln, was an absolute stud in high school. I think I posted something on signing day or close to signing day a couple of years ago saying, like, I can't believe this kid's going to Marshall. Like, he was clearly a Big Ten kid. And Ohio State actually looked at him. They had him at camp a couple times. And so he had an unbelievable year this year at Marshall, and he's off to the portal. My latest as of like an hour ago is that there has not been any contact with Yates in Ohio State yet. I don't know if that will change, but that was just an interesting name to me that kind of popped up in the portal. And again, isn't like a super – you'd have some team control there a little bit, local kid. And, of course, you have a situation there where he's not like coming in – like you're not bringing in like a guy who's like a year ahead of Arvell Reese and like gets weird. Like he'd be behind – like in age, he'd be behind some of your returners. Now, is he going to transfer into a situation like Ohio State's where he's not guaranteed to start or something like that? That's the other side of this coin too. It's like, okay, does the Marshall production transfer to Ohio State? And they played Marshall this year, so they got a good look at Jaden Yates. Does that translate to Ohio State level? And does he, he's undoubtedly going to have like Big Ten, probably some mid to low tier SEC, ACC stuff where he can kind of go right in and start. So how enticing would Ohio State be? So we'll see. like I said, no contact yet, but that was just, as I was watching this morning, the names roll in, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So we'll see if
Yates led Marshall in tackles in that game with 7 against Ohio State. Just a reminder, that was a 49-14 game that was, largely nondescript, even though Marshall is proving to be a pretty good victory for Ohio State going out and winning their conference. But I agree, Yates is solid, but you hit the nail on the head right there that, Ohio State can't necessarily promise anything with what they still have at the linebacker room. Just because your number is low doesn't mean they don't have guys that can step into roles and be successful, but they have to backfill. They have to backfill to keep the number at least in hailing distance of where it needs to be.
And of course, they love what they just signed at linebacker. So are you going to bring in a guy like who could potentially block a Riley Pettijohn or a TJ Alford early? Maybe you want to give those guys those developmental snaps. So again, I don't know if that would make sense for either party, but it was one of those names that came across. I'm like, well, that would be interesting just because of the season he had. He just beat from Columbus. But let's
I've got 15 questions already in the queue. I've just been kind of saving them there. Just to kind of hit some news of the day, Miles Walker out of Connecticut. He entered the portal. He is the latest member of Ohio State to make that announcement. Offensive lineman, really wasn't even repping with the threes. He had to deal with an injury. Just never really came together for him. Wish him the best of luck at whatever the next stop is, if he goes back to the Northeast or whatever that may be. But I don't think we're done hearing names of Ohio State players entering the portal. I've not seen any numbers posted yet of how many people have entered. The day is still going on. It's still 3:54 Eastern time. A number at 3 o'clock doesn't necessarily tell the whole story of how many kids will enter the portal here on day one. And sometimes players stagger it out a little bit. You want to get out there early, maybe try and get ahead of other people in terms of garnering the interest, but you also don't have to race. I mean, the portal isn't open for one day. It's just like National Signing Day opens the signing period. It's not a one-day affair. So there's still going to be a lot more movement. I think the big question, something that Ryan Day was asked about yesterday, about players who are entering the portal, will they remain with the team for the playoff run? Because the dates are really weird now, because most schools are on semesters. Ohio State, when I went there, was on quarters, went to semesters, still a long time ago. I'm old. It's all well and good to be like, well, I'll play, for Ohio State or be on the sidelines. If you're playing, you're probably not transferring for this Tennessee game. But what happens if Ohio State gets to the national semifinals? Semesters already started. So, we don't necessarily know what's going to be the case. I mean, are guys going to try and jump out quickly enough to be able to enroll at their new schools, or are they going to sit there and maybe just say, we've seen guys go through spring practice with their old program to then go to their new program. So a lot of unknowns. I mean, I don't know if you have anything to add to that as I get to our questions.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be interesting to see what guys decide to do. Obviously, fans and everyone else are going to applaud the guys who stay, and then maybe some guys will get vilified for leaving in the middle of a playoff run. But as you said, the academic calendar and the ridiculous NCAA schedule is to blame for that. It's not necessarily a character thing with the kid as much as it is like they've got to get enrolled in the other school and start taking classes and everything else and keep their academics in order. So, that's going to be a challenge, but that's what happens when you schedule your playoffs, your draft, and your free agency all in the same 2 weeks. So
I don't know who is in charge of the calendar in Indianapolis, but I mean, they're not doing anybody any favors, and it's going to grind coaches out of the profession. I mean, year one, we're seeing just this absolute crush for teams that are in the playoff and everything else, but it's not like it's any better for teams that are just in a regular boring old bowl game are still kind of dealing with the same calendar. So I don't know if I have an answer as to what the calendar should look like. I mean, I have some ideas, but maybe if, next Monday for this show, I'll have some better ideas, put together. But as it stands right now, it just really seems like nobody has a freaking clue as to how to operate a calendar for any of this.
One thing I think would be helpful is either get rid of the early signing period, which just doesn't seem like that's a thing anyone's considering at this point. So I would move the early signing period until roughly July 10th. So like somewhere, not the very, very beginning of July, but get it into the second week of July somewhere. Set signing day there. That gives the coaches about almost 3 weeks off in July until they got to go do their media. Well, just if you're the head coach, you have to go do your media obligation. But if you're assistant, you get a few weeks off there at that point before fall camp. And it gets a lot of the mess out of the way, like as far as guys who just know what they want to do. Tavian St. Clair can just sign, whatever. Gets a lot of that mess out of the way, and then you can have your February period. And guys can still leave their class if coach leave. I mean, like there's things. Look, the freedom of movement now is so slanted toward the player now that nothing is really that binding anymore anyway. But that can at least get some of the hoopla out of the way before the season starts, and you're not dealing with this the freaking week of the conference championship games. So that is the one thing I think would be helpful. And then you got to figure out what to do about the portal. Because that's a little bit of a tougher thing to maneuver. But, that's where I would start. Get things out of the way. Coach still have their month of July off, basically.
I covered from afar. Marc was in Canton for the Ohio High School State Championship games. I was covering them from Spectrum, and I had an interesting conversation with somebody, I don't even remember who, about moving the early signing day prior to the season, and that there is this fear that kids would opt out of their senior season if they already signed somewhere, that they would just get to moving toward that. And my counterpoint was, so they would give up a season of development to do that. I don't know how their future home would really view that. I mean, if a kid wants to reclassify after 3 years and go early, then that's one thing. But I barring a worldwide pandemic, I don't see a world of where somebody signs with Ohio State, Georgia, USC, whatever, and is like, I'm good. I'm not going to play my senior year. But
they could do that. If they were going to do that, they could do that now. What would stop them from doing it now?
Well, but they're not. I mean, they're not signed. But I mean, the signing isn't worth a piece of paper. It's not even in NLI right anymore.
I think we're getting too much into the weeds of like how flimsy these agreements are to begin with. I think that's overthinking it. I think kids can do that now if they want. I would certainly advise against it very strongly. But like, if Bryce Underwood hadn't played this year, how does that change Bryce Underwood's recruitment?
Well, he would have
maybe he gets a little less.
He wouldn't have been coached by
a little less NIL money. Yeah, a little less NIL money, maybe. And that's the other thing. Like schools can that's leverage against your NIL. You want to be out there playing. I don't think that's
it was an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And I sat there and had the whole conversation. I didn't go, whatever, that's just dumb, and walk away or anything like that. I had a lot of sitting around time between games. They really put a lot of time between these games. So, but let me say this before we get into Coastal Buckeyes question and some other things. Sean Terry out of Ironton impressed the hell out of me.
He was good.
And he looked really, really good for Ironton in their state finals game.
Yeah, he had probably the performance of the weekend. That was a special performance. And Missouri obviously flipped him from Notre Dame over the summer, so that's a nice get for Missouri there as they continue to kind of build themselves up as a top 25 type program. So yeah, that was a really breakout type of performance at Ironton's a great program, but probably a guy who, doesn't get a lot of hype around him playing down there on the Ohio River. So that was a nice breakout performance for him. He was definitely the difference in that game for Ironton for sure.
Right, and my favorite game of the weekend was that Indian Valley game, the last game of the whole deal. I mean, that thing was a banger. But Marc has put some stuff up on the YouTube channel from his coverage there. We'll probably have a little bit more. I mean, we got to see the Moeller quarterback. I mean, in 26. I mean, there were definitely some recruiting angles there, more so than just going and covering the state finals. Because again, Shot Terry's going to Missouri. I mean, we see some kids. It's like, oh wow, I finally see it in the biggest of stages of what he's doing. I'm going to mark this one here, but Coastal Buckeye. How aggressive? How many transfer offensive linemen do we realistically take? We kind of touched upon this a little, but I like to double back on the questions. People take the time to ask them, so we'll answer them. I mean, I think you got to take at least two. I really think you got to take two. Somebody who is like strictly tackle. Give me that 6'7", 315 guy that is a tackle that can play in space, and then get me maybe a swing guy. Now, I've seen some people kind of talking about Hinsman and whether or not he's a guard or a center. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Do you go out and get somebody who can, do you get a third guy, or is your second guy, maybe more of a guard center swing as opposed to a guard tackle? But I think Ohio State really needs to replenish its tackle numbers, because it's a big ask to say to Carter Lowe, we need you to come in and start day one. I mean, we've said this on shows before. You have to go back to Michael Jordan. Ohio State's Michael Jordan, not the Chicago Bulls' Michael Jordan, for the last time a true freshman started on the offensive line at Ohio State. And I think prior to that it was Orlando Pace. So it don't happen often.
Yeah, I think 2 to 3 is the range. And as much of that will depend upon what they're able to get, who's out there. Like, I think minimum 2, and then, like I said, if they can get 3 they like, I think they would probably do that.
All right, next one, Gizmo. How about the running back from USC, Joyner? I have not looked it up. I was not aware that an SC running back had entered the portal. Quentin Joyner, I guess. I've been working on Tennessee stuff, trying to get ahead there. Joyner's stats this year, let's see. He 63 carries for 478, 3 touchdowns, 7.6 average. Saw some action kind of sporadically through the season. I don't know enough about him. He's 5'11", 216. He was a freshman this year out of the state of Texas. I mean, I think you have to be willing to explore everything out there. I mean, there are going to be some guys that's like, wow, we're just, geographically, we're not going to be able to get them, or for whatever reason, or just what the room's going to be. But, to Gizmo's point, I haven't heard anything about that. I've not, I've been so tunnel visioned on Tennessee right now that the portal is just kind of happening around me.
Yeah, I mean, he would fit the profile of something I think Ohio State would like. Had a really good freshman year, about 7 yards per carry. And I'm just throwing out a name here. I've heard nothing of contact here. You look at someone like Ahmad Hardy from Louisiana Monroe. Was a freshman All-American. I mean, guys like that would be of interest. Or you could look at guys who are kind of 1-year deals, just a kind of a veteran to come in and help mentor the young guys, share carries with James Peoples, and then you kind of turn it over to this incoming running back class like the following year. But yeah, I mean, that's, if you told me they went after a guy like that, would make total sense.
Troy V asking a question that has been asked multiple times, so I apologize to everybody who's asked it. I just picked Troy V's question, but apparently Chip Trainum is entering the portal. Can the Buckeyes get him out of the portal? I will repeat what I said in the chat, because we were talking about something else. Ohio State did not bring him in as a running back in the first place. They brought him in as a linebacker. Necessity forced him to running back, and I like Chip. He's a good kid. He does some things well, but I don't know if he necessarily fits what Ohio State needs. Yeah, he is a senior running back who can sit there and maybe mentor a room that will be pretty young, but you also need to have somebody that can, you'd like to have a 1A and a 1B running back out there, somebody to complement James Peoples. And I've not seen the production out of Chip to think that he's necessarily the guy. And that's, again, I'm if I start talking bad about a kid, it means somebody has a gun to my head. I don't talk bad about the kids. That's just not, they're getting paid, but I don't talk bad about them. But I don't think he's a fit.
Yeah, I think Ohio State probably looking for a little more pop than that would be my guess.
All right, let's see. Need more cowbell. Find a Caleb Downs. That guy's not in that guy that's not in the transfer portal, but his agent is taking calls. I mean, it's crazy that the portal opened at midnight or whatever, and I don't know how many kids have already exited the portal, but obviously conversations happen. And whether or not you want to call it tampering or you want to just sit there and call it smart portal management or whatever the hell you want to call it, guys get out of the portal pretty quickly. Sometimes too, it's like just there. I mean, to Mark's point earlier, that if Keelan Keeley enters, it's going to be Notre Dame. So, it's already kind of there. And I'm not saying Notre Dame did anything wrong. I'm not saying Keelan Keeley did anything wrong. But, it would be great. I mean, if they could find another Caleb Downs caliber player, freshman of the year in the SEC and everything else. But that don't happen often. If you're that good, you're generally not leaving. And remember, he left because Nick Saban, the GOAT, retired. I mean, so where are we seeing something even remotely similar? I mean, and I'm not saying that everybody that enters the portal enters it because they're not great or they're not a good fit or whatever, but Downs is the story that you tell for 20 years. Like, I can't believe we pulled that one off.
Yeah, and it looks like a lot of teams are opting to kind of hang on to their coaches who are on the hot seat right now versus paying these ridiculous buyouts they've negotiated. So I don't know how many of these coaching carousel type moves we're going to see. I think next year is going to be the year where we see a lot more big name jobs open. So that may be interesting for the portal. It's hard. The sentiment, of course, is that like you always want to get a player like that if they're available. I just don't know that there's anything clear and obvious out there yet.
Just to answer a question, I'll punch it up. Asian Posh, Doreen, hello, Doreen, is asking why we're not streaming on Twitter. X is constantly changing its rules. And you have to have a premium or premium plus account, and I don't know what level it has to be to stream to it. And they made the change like overnight at some point. I mean,
yeah,
I think
we'll get that taken care of here in the next few days. Hopefully by the end of the week we'll have that taken care of. The goalpost got moved on that. We haven't yet adjusted to that, but we will here in the next few days. I was out of town for high school football championships, and the guys were busy all weekend with the CFP stuff and everything else. But we'll get us back streaming on Twitter here in the next few days.
It was on my list of things to discuss with Mark, but it's Monday. I mean, it's not like I've been dragging it. I just haven't had a chance. I mean, he messaged me at 2:00. It's like, let's do a show at 3:30. I'm like, okay, and then I didn't even think about it. So that's that. So hopefully that answers that for you on that one, Doreen. I saw you've already secured your tickets to the Tennessee game. It's going to be a cold one. David Ransbottom, how about a kicker? And there's some other things. And the name that everybody's talking about is Eastern Michigan's Jesus Gomez. And he is in the portal. He posted his little screenshot of his release or whatever. And I think he's going to be very popular. I think he's going to have a lot of people going in there. I'm not a big fan of Ohio State not necessarily having scholarship kickers. we saw what that did to Florida State back in the day. But I don't know. I mean, Ohio State, obviously, if it makes 2 kicks last week or whatever it was 2 weeks ago, we're looking at a very different situation. I'm not studying Tennessee. I'm sitting there talking about going to Philippe's in Los Angeles. I'm talking about doing a lot of these other, and my hope is still to go to Philippe's in Los Angeles. But yeah, I think they absolutely need to get a kicker. I've seen some people talk about punter. Remember, they got Nick McClarty, the 6'7" Aussie. They're having to teach him how to punt. Because and I'm not trying to move the conversation, David, but we'll get back to the kicker in a second. It's not like punt the ball as far as you can. There's things about hang time and everything else. I mean, we hear about out kicking coverage, and that has more to do with kick than football than it does with a spouse or anything like that. But yeah, they're teaching him how to do that. So I think they're going to be fine at punter, even though they're not, they don't have the biggest leg at punter right now. But I do think they need to sit there and seriously pursue a kicker. There are people who are concerned about getting, into a bidding war over a kicker. Just ask Ryan Day and Ross Bjork right now about the value of a kicker. I mean, I'm just going to be honest.
Yeah, I said on the site, we were talking about this on the website a few days ago, and I would recruit kickers and punters. I would just exclusively go to the portal for all my kickers and punters at this point. High school kicker recruiting is such a crapshoot. None of these guys really know how to evaluate kickers. They all just go off the lists, like the Coles kicking rankings, and
Right.
None of these guys like Brian Hartline, who's in charge of some of the special. Like Brian Hartline's not out there knowing exactly what to look for in a punter. And he played in the NFL. He's not going out there and doing serious evaluations. So I would just I would take the risk out of it as much as I could, and I would just allocate some NIL dollars every year to we're going to go get a kicker or a punter from the portal. And you'd like to go and get a guy who's maybe got 2 years left or even 3 if you can really find. But sometimes you may just be getting 1-year rentals. But I just think if you can go out and get guys who have proven they can kick at the Division I level, they've proven they can hit 50 yards, they've proven they can be accurate inside 40, which is really the name of the game if we're being honest. If you can take so much risk out of it, in my opinion, by doing it that way, that I don't know, I don't know why you wouldn't just do that. So we'll see what Ohio State does moving forward. Obviously, they're going to be looking for a kicker this year, but I just think moving forward, you just exclusively recruit the portal.
How about using Demarion Witten at kicker? He kicked at Glenville, and
his nickname's Toe.
Yeah, the straight-on kicker or whatever. He really did everything for the Tarblooders when he was a senior. No, I don't think that's the direction anybody wants that to go.
Look, he did it effectively. Hats off to him. Did better than I would do out there, but it did not look pretty. But it was effective.
All right, let's jump through here. Larry, Charles Bentley was at the Woody last week. Any chance he was there to interview for, I'm assuming, the OL job? You don't generally have a candidate for a job post on social media that they are going to the school to do that. There are a lot of things there. I'm going to fly close to the sun, and I get burned often by saying this. We love the idea, and I'm saying we as people in general, not we as in me, we need to have former Buckeyes as all of the coaches and everything else. Well, Charles Bentley had a successful NFL career, had a successful career at Ohio State, has his O-line academy and everything else. He also was responsible for a pretty bad judgment of an offensive line class for Ohio State. So it doesn't always work out by doing that. For every Brian Hartline situation that works out, there are 100 that don't elsewhere. So I understand people's frustrations with where O-line recruiting is and everything else, but let's remember this. I mean, Ohio State is on its 4th offensive line in earnest this year. It's not Justin Fry's fault that Josh Simmons got hurt. It's not Justin Fry's fault that Seth McLaughlin got hurt. I think the development is not bad there. I mean, you can only do what you can only do. I mean, you can't turn a zebra into a cheetah or whatever. It doesn't work out that way. But as for LaCharles's visit, no, it had nothing to do with the job interview. Absolutely 100 billion% no. But I wouldn't get too wrapped up in the situation of that you have to be an alumni of a school to be able to be an effective coach. I don't buy into that at all.
Yeah, look, we'll see what happens in the offseason. We don't even know how the season's going to end. I mean, I think the options, I think there are certain schools, you look at the playoff bracket, and I think there's certain schools you can be well, they're going to be one and done, or their ceiling is winning a game and then they're going to be out. Ohio State could lose to Tennessee. Ohio State could win the whole thing. I have no great read on how this is going to go for them. So until we kind of let this play out a little bit, I don't know what the coaching turnover may or may not be. Yeah, I mean, to Kevin's point, the recruiting sins of the past did catch up to them this year with some injuries, but you're also not going to just replace. Josh Simmons is going to go in the first round of the draft. Really hard to just have another first round caliber offensive tackle sitting on your bench. I mean, that's not a very common thing, at least anyone that's ready. I mean, you might have a guy on your bench who's not ready, who's going to be a first round pick in 4 years or something, but you're generally not going to be able to just plug and play a Josh Simmons. Seth McLaughlin was probably going to win the Remington. Maybe he still will. He's a finalist. I don't know. I guess he won't, but he probably was going to win it. So those are hard players to replace. So we'll see. I mean, I would like them to kind of get out of the bubble of Heartline, Lord, just every positions a former player. Eddie George is a hot name now for what he did at Tennessee State or whatever. I'm just okay, that was Tennessee State. We don't need to necessarily make him Ohio State's next head coach this offseason. I would like to break things up a little bit. I think there's some value to bringing in kind of an outside point of view to things from a position coach standpoint of okay, this is what you guys were doing. Here's an unbiased, objective look at things from someone who has no real ties to what was going on in this building. Here's where you need to improve. Here's what I would do. I think there's value to that too.
Just to GWWAZ, I'm not going to try to pronounce something with just a ton of consonants, but talks about that Simmons and McLaughlin were not recruited by Fry. Let's not forget that when Simmons came in from San Diego State, his PFF grade was bad. There were a lot of people what the hell are they doing bringing this guy in? I mean, he was, if I remember right, he was in the second portal. He wasn't in the first portal. He was in the second portal, and there's a lot less chicken on the bone in the second portal than there is in the first portal. And he wasn't very good for the first couple games. And I think if you catch him in a moment of honesty, I think Simmons would be the first one to say that. So there was, somebody else began his development, but, and I'm not saying.
I think Fry gets a lot of credit for Simmons. He picked him out of the portal. He recruited him out of the portal, and he developed him into what is likely going to be a first-round draft pick. You can say what you want about it. I've had more than my fair share of criticisms of the offensive line and offensive line recruiting over the years, but you have to give him credit for Simmons. He identified him in the portal, took him when a bunch of people were why are they doing this? And he blossomed into essentially a first-round pick at Ohio State. So McLaughlin's a little different, obviously, spending so much time at Alabama, but people forget his Michigan performance last year, and Alabama fans were ready to run him right out of town. He was kind of their Kyle McCord scapegoat for their season, and he got that under control, and we didn't see any of that this year. So I don't know. I'm happy to talk about Fry's negatives, but I think Josh Simmons is a big positive on his scouting report.
Ohio State has kind of had the same situation at OL coach. I don't know if I'm going to put Stud in that same position. And, maybe I just have an aversion to the stud years or whatever. I don't know, but marginal recruiters and pretty decent development. Now, again, you can only develop what you got. And when you miss, when you don't hit your number, or you sit there and you bring in guys that probably were never going to play at Ohio State, you get what you get. But, I mean, Ohio State, certainly with Ed Warner. Ed Warner was like the most awkward recruiter out there. And they did everything they could to hide him on the recruiting trail. His players would have run through a brick wall that was on fire for him, though. But if you were a recruit, you're like, who's this weirdo? I mean, it's just kind of how it was. And so I'm not going to dismiss the disappointment that people have with, maybe with the offensive line, but I'm going to sit there and try and point people in a direction that I think is correct. And I think that there are some narratives out there about Fry that are unfair. Let me jump through here. We've answered that one. Mika, is Will Howard healthy? Everybody's beat up at this point. Everybody, nobody's 100%. The healthiest you are generally 98% of the time is day one of fall camp, and then it all goes downhill there. I think everybody's a little, as I said, a little beat up, but I've not heard anything. I will say on a name that I did find interesting. I didn't sleep last night. I can't sleep. Don't ask. I just can't sleep anymore. I watched the 4-hour on Fast Forward, the 4-hour ESPN show, and they were talking about, as if it was fact about how Jeremiah Smith has been hurt. Now we remember he got his ankle twisted against Northwestern, and they pointed out the numbers were down and that maybe he should maybe he'll be healthier with kind of having this little bit of an extended break or whatever. But Ohio State doesn't talk about injuries, but that's not been anything that we've talked about. But I've not heard anything necessarily on Will Howard. I mean, yeah, he got hit hard against Michigan and probably wasn't right. But you're getting at, I mean, even if he was kind of in the questionable concussion protocol, he's going to have enough time to clear out of that.
Yeah, I mean, my answer to that would be he's probably about as healthy as you would expect anyone to be at this point in the season. I don't see any lingering effects from the hit he took against Michigan showing up, but he's got to make better decisions. That's the key thing. He's got to make better decisions than he made in that game. And,
absolutely,
I think physically he's pretty healthy.
Right. Need more cowbell again. Need more D tackles. Or how many D tackles does Georgia need? Maybe they could spare one or two. Ohio State isn't going to spare a backup quarterback to Georgia with Carson Beck getting blasted, and even Gunnar Stockton got popped on what looked like a targeting call or something like that. It don't work that way. But I understand the tongue-in-cheek nature of your comment. And down there in the South, that's where a lot of these D tackles are grown. I mean, it's just the reality of it. I mean, Ohio State goes to Georgia and gets Caden McDonald their one tech, and they're just other guys that are from Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana, and you can get them sometimes if you're Ohio State, but Georgia, Georgia's got a couple of natties here recently, and it's going to be tough to beat them on some of these kids, especially, we always say that the bigger the kid, the bigger the mama's boy, and it's sometimes harder to get them from, away from home.
I actually like their defensive tackle outlook for next year. I've been a big proponent of playing Caden McDonald more. I hope he plays more snaps in the playoffs. I think he's earned more playing time. I think he makes big plays pretty much whenever he's in the game. So I'm actually pretty optimistic about their defensive tackle outlook for next year. I think they've got a game changer with McDonald. And a good foundation there with some depth, some young guys, and another year of development for Jason Moore, and some of these other guys they're kind of growing into their roles. So, I'm not too worried about it. I mean, if a great player comes in the portal, sure. I think almost every position, especially one like D-line where you can rotate, you take a look. But I don't like when I sit here and I think about, okay, what is really concerning about next year? I don't really think about defensive tackle too much.
I'm going to punch this up from Greg. This was something that kind of set the internet on fire here recently about Chase Herbstreit, who committed to Michigan. Having seen Chase Herbstreit play 4 times, he's a homeless man's Tate Martell. Now, I understand that we're in a casual chat and we make comments like that or whatever. I mean, it certainly was a surprising move. I think it was like a psyop, in my opinion. I think that, that it was just to kind of tweak Ohio State. Let's not forget, his twins went to Clemson. And then his next kid went to Ohio State, had the, very scary health moment, medically retired. And now Chase, who I think is probably the best of the kids in terms of being a football player. But, I again, being in the same class as Underwood and everything else, I mean, again, Davis Warren managed to play. So, I mean, they've been – I've seen crazier bleep happen. Super chat, B-Man. Fry didn't develop Seth. He was all SEC center 2 years ago, and Simmons is an athletic freak. Watch O-line, hand technique. It's horrible. Again, and I'll let Marc take lead on this one. I'm just going to say that Simmons, go back and look at the PFF grades. Everybody wrote the stories. I mean, I don't think we can go back all that far in the message board to see the posts, but people were flipping out. I don't understand what they're doing. Why didn't they pursue more offensive linemen in the first portal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? I didn't say that Fry was the offensive line whisperer. I didn't say he was the best developer. Ohio State doesn't have 6 Joe Moore awards or anything else. But under the coaching of Justin Fry, Josh Simmons has played his way into being a first-round draft pick. Facts are facts. Yeah. I am not an offensive lineman. I'm not an offensive lineman guru. So I could go in and try and watch hand technique, and I'd probably be like, yeah, okay. And as my eyes glaze over, it's just not something that I'm interested in. But I still think Fry is getting – I think some of the criticism is based in fact, and I think some of it is based in just people being ready for somebody else.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's giving him real much credit with McLaughlin. We know he spent several years at Alabama. You really can't use Josh Simmons against Fry, though. Josh Simmons was a one-year starter at San Diego State, who Ohio State fans were almost perturbed that they even took him, thought some other guys out there were better, that ended up not being better. And everyone was kind of like, this was their big splash. Well, yeah, it was. He was developed into a first-round pick. And, yeah, Josh Simmons is a great athlete. I can't possibly think of the last good offensive tackle I've seen that wasn't a great athlete. I mean, that's kind of goes with the position. You still have to coach them. You still have to teach them. So, we can not give credit for McLaughlin. That's fine. We have to give credit for Simmons. There's no matter how much you don't like Justin Fry, you can't possibly talk your way out of the Josh Simmons deal. That was clearly the best thing Justin Fry has done at Ohio State, is getting Simmons out of the portal and then developing him.
I will say this. It seems of all of the positions for coaches in college football, there are the least amount of offensive line coaches out there that seem to be in this upper cut. It's even at Tennessee, when David Sanders was still having his flirtations with Ohio State down the stretch, there were Tennessee fans, I was lurking on their boards, that were ready to run their OL coach out because of recruiting failures and the worried recruiting failure on David Sanders. So it's, yes, Ohio State is the biggest athletic department out there, most sports, all this revenue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If there are only 15 offensive line coaches out there in the nation that check all the boxes, yeah, you'd be like, well, Ohio State should be able to just go in and take one. It's Ohio State, for God's sake. I mean, but that hasn't been the case. I mean, we can go back to Stud, and we can go back to Warner, and we can go back to Bowman. When was the last offensive line coach at Ohio State that fans were happy with? I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to it. I mean, definitely pre-internet, definitely pre-cell phone, maybe even pre like color TV. I don't know.
Yeah, I like clearly things have got to improve, whether that's recruiting, wherever you want to place the most blame in terms of what they're doing wrong on the offensive line. The play has to improve there. But I think we have to be able to talk about things objectively. Like, I can sit here and criticize O-line recruiting. I can sit here and talk about a million things I don't like about the O-line, but I'm not going to, like, he has to get credit for Simmons, or else we're just not having an honest conversation.
I'm going to jump ahead to this one. First, I want to sit there and Doug Shepard and thank him for this post. I will only pay for one subscription from here on out, and it is Buckeye Huddle. And we appreciate that. I mean, obviously, we enjoy doing our YouTube shows, but our main gig is BuckeyeHuddle.com. And if you're not a member, you have no excuse. It's $4.99 for your first month. We are 12 days away from Ohio State's first December playoff game at Ohio Stadium. Could be the first of 4 games. So much stuff going on right now. We have the huddle board. Tom, Tony, and myself cover the team. Marc covers recruiting. We have our team of experts, including Ross Fulton, Mickey Pettit, Devin Radcliffe, who all make you a smarter football fan. $4.99. You can't even get a venti coffee with a shot of anything in it at Starbucks for less than $5. So, check us out over at Buckeye Huddle. And while you're at it, why don't you sit there and give us a thumbs up here on this show if you're watching us on YouTube, if you're watching on us Facebook, if you want to sit there and send us a few stars, that would be cool too. Subscribe to the channel, thumbs up, hit the bell. All of that helps us with the algorithm. We will put this up as a audio podcast as well after the show. So if you're listening there, leave us a 5-star review. That helps us with our distribution and get out to more Buckeye fans all across the country. $4.99 first month. Do it. But
transfer portal too. I mean, this is like transfer portal's nuts. It's first day we already got hundreds in there. So,
but this is the question I wanted to get to, and I still have other questions in the queue that we'll get to. When is Ohio State going to hire a kicking coach? Ohio State got away from having a special teams coordinator with Parker Fleming. That just didn't work. What Ohio State is doing now, I don't think it's necessarily working. Okay, Hartline, you handle this part, and Walt, you handle this part, and Ryan Day will handle this part. I'm not saying you need to go back to having a coordinator. You don't need to have a special teams coach, kicking coach that goes out on the road. That does not have to be one of your recruiting coaches. You can handle that kind of recruiting at your camps when the kids come in to see you. You don't have to go out. You can have somebody who can swing by and see a kid or whatever if that's necessary. I do think that there is some merit of having somebody to Larsenowitz's comment or whatever about having somebody who is tasked with being a mechanical kicking, punting coach, whatever. I think that there is certainly something to that. These coaching staffs are just getting larger and larger and larger and larger. I mean, you look at Mark Pantoni's staff on the recruiting side, having to have portal people and everything else. And I don't know if buried under 8 layers of QCs and everything else, they have a kicking coach. But if they don't, why the hell not? I mean, they need to.
Yeah, it just can't be one of your 10. Like it can't be one of your like on the road recruit. You don't want to do that. But with support staffs being as big as they are now, it does make sense to have someone who can kind of come in and work on mechanics and maybe even more so work on the mental component, which seems to be the biggest thing with kickers and goalies.
Here we go from Rick S. And this is also one that Swish with 5s in there. I'm assuming it's Swish has something similar there. I haven't done a deep dive at players in the portal yet, but 3 guys caught my eye. Wide receiver Eric Singleton Jr., tight end Max Clare, and safety Dylan Thieneman. I know he was at Purdue. So thoughts on those guys, Mark? I mean, again, you'd mentioned earlier about wide receiver, where that may necessarily stand. I mean, but your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is like Singleton's a star. Like he's an absolute star. And I think he would probably complement what Ohio State has right now. He's more of like a deep ball, quick twitch guy. The problem you're going to have is there are bigger issues in receiver on this roster. Obviously, I think we can all agree on that. And to get a player like Singleton out of the portal is not going to be cheap. and you've got Jeremiah Smith on the roster, you've got Carnell Tate and Brandon Innes, and you got some of the guys are bringing in and Mylan Graham, and it's like, okay, how can we justify this? And if you're Singleton, you're not going to be wide receiver one at all. Like Jeremiah Smith is wide receiver one the next. So like, it's going to be really hard to find a receiver like that in the portal for Ohio State. It's going to be really hard to make the money work. It's going to be really hard to convince the player that he's going to get enough targets. Like that's going to be a really tough thing for them to accomplish. But in a vacuum, yeah, like Singleton's a stud. I don't know how active they'll be at safety. Like obviously Downs is back. They very much like what they saw from Jalen McClain so far this year. That's been kind of a nice surprise. They still have Malik Hartford. I think Fahim Delane coming in is going to be a guy who's going to be very difficult to keep off the field as a freshman. They may just let that ride. And then tight end, I just don't know. I mean, they're losing a couple. Jelani Thurman's got some good minutes this year. Bennett Christian's got some minutes this year. You're bringing in two more. What room is Demarion Witten in next year? Is he in the receiver room or is he in the tight end room? That's another offensive weapon at the position. So I don't know. I mean, I think, again, you're going to have a hard time with a big name tight end because you're not really throwing to the tight ends a ton. And then like, so are you gonna be the high bidder for like a tight end in the portal? I think there's some issues there as well. I think you're more likely to get some like big blocker, like some just blocking specialist to help you run your 12 personnel. But we'll see.
We are here at an hour. We will have a couple more questions. We'll keep going. Obviously, Super Chats will keep us here longer, but we try to do this weekly as schedules permit. Generally at 3 o'clock, we had to move it to 3:30 this week. Again, syncing up schedules, not always the easiest thing to do with so many moving pieces going on. Mika Hanna, any truth to the rumor of us going after a transfer quarterback? I don't think we touched upon this in the Q&A section. Just my thought, how many quarterbacks do they lose? I mean, I know that I heard the rumors out there, people talking about it or whatever. I think you're going to have to bring in somebody, but you're not going to go out and bring in Dylan Gabriel. Now, I've heard the rumor out there that that it was being reported by somebody that maybe they go after a 1-year top end quarterback. I don't know if I'm necessarily subscribing to that one yet. One of the things that Ohio State hasn't done this year, despite being up in so many games, is really get a lot of experience for its younger quarterbacks. Obviously, Devin Brown has been the 2. He's on his way out. I haven't seen a ton of Julian Sayin. Yes, I remember when Julian Sayin hit Bennett Christian on a touchdown going into the north end zone at Ohio Stadium, and it was nice. It was great. But, I don't know what's going on, but if you go out and you bring in a 1-year rental quarterback, could you lose all of your quarterbacks if you do that? I mean, you have to have a path to grow your room. You have to have a path of proper matriculation. 50-cent word right there. You have to have a proper path for that, because if not, how are you going to sit there and necessarily recruit? Now, it's not going to scare off Tavian St. Clair. I mean, he's coming in as a true freshman, but I wouldn't do anything to risk running off Julian Sayin, and I'm not saying that's necessarily the case. The math doesn't work for me. The math doesn't work for me on how that is. I reserve the right to have a different opinion in 7 days, though.
Short answer to your question is yes, they're going to go after a transfer quarterback. The longer answer is that transfer quarterback going to look more like Gunnar Hoke, or is it going to look like more like Will Howard? I think something is very key here. Like if this staff is going to be here long term, and I really don't have a reason to think they're not going to be at this point, they have to get the Julian Sayin situation right, which means they have to properly evaluate him, and they have to make the right decision on whether or not they're going with him next year, or whether they would bring in a starting caliber quarterback from the portal and risk running him off. So there are conversations there that are going to have to take place. My instinct personally is you let Julian Sayin be your starting quarterback next year. They've talked highly of him throughout the offseason. Just watching him at practice, I think the ball comes off his hand a little bit different than a lot of the other guys on the roster, like Will Howard and Devin Brown. But if someone, and the Quinn Ewers rumor, obviously, Bobby Mack asked him about the Quinn Ewers rumor. So Quinn Ewers is not going to be the starting quarterback at Texas next year. Like, that's just a fact. Now, is he going to go to the NFL? I don't know. But he's not going to be the starting quarterback at Texas. Like, Arch Manning is going to be the starting quarterback at Texas next year. You can take that to the bank, whatever slogan you want to use there. So it is possible that Quinn Ewers could be on the market this offseason. And while I wouldn't say Quinn has been like a generational player or lived up to maybe that number one ranking, I do think he's been a very good college quarterback. And you would have to think his market value to some of these programs are like a Florida State or I'm trying to think of Georgia. You would have to think his market value would be several $1 million. Would Ohio State play that game is the interesting kind of hypothetical. I think for like someone like yours, I think they would at least make a phone call and kind of kick some tires, see what he's thinking. But again, you really better be careful with Julian. Like, you have to get Julian Sayin right now. If you don't think Julian Sayin's your guy, then do what you have to do at that point. But if you think Julian Sayin's going to be a really good college quarterback for you, I would start that process next year.
This isn't a Tate Martell situation of where you sit there and it's like, well,
we can't win with this guy.
He's the next man up, and we don't feel great about it. So, I mean, I don't know. Rusty Jesse said, could Ohio State pursue Jalen Kitna, who played a lot at UAB this year? Again, it's going to come down to what is the evaluation of what they have. I mean,
again, I think you're looking at 1-year rental starter, or you're looking at experience older backup. Like, I don't think you're splitting the difference there on someone like Jalen Kitna. Like, I think you're talking Quinn Ewers or something similar to that, or you're talking Gunnar Hoke. Like, I don't think they're going anything in between. I don't think they want a guy with like 3 years of term left, because now you're blocking all sorts of other, like, I really think it's going to be an all or nothing. It's going to be a top of the market guy that you think's a difference maker and can get you over the hump, or it's guy who will likely never play but gives you some depth in the room and some experience.
We'll kind of power through a couple because I keep adding questions to the queue as I see them. Cowbell, when does Ohio State have to get to the 105 roster limit, house settlement? I mean, is that thing even fully signed yet at this point? Yeah, I mean, I think it's still in purgatory.
Yeah, I believe so. So I don't have the answer to that right this second. I believe Kevin's right that it's still kind of in purgatory. I mean, it won't be a problem for Ohio State. It'll just be fewer walk-ons, I guess.
Right. I mean, you're just going to have to kind of figure it out. I mean, and again, I don't want, we'll just call him Brian S. I don't want him texting me and yelling at me about 105, because he always seems to text me at the worst possible times, but it'll get sorted out. But nothing, I don't think anything is official on that yet.
Ryan Schottenstein?
Yeah, sure. Clever and witty. Why are we recruiting all these 5-star quarterbacks and none of them are playing? I think some of it has to go down to how quarterbacks are getting ranked. I mean, is one thing. And then it's just, there's also geometry to it of when you come in and what's ahead of you and everything else. So it's not as simple as like, okay, 3 services decided you were a 5-star. That doesn't mean that the football gods decided that you were a 5-star and that you are a 5-star. And I'm not saying that Ohio State kids that were previously 5-stars are not as good as reported, but there's just a lot of geometry that goes into work there. And then also when you have players who leave early for NFL declarations, that really screws up the math. That is far and away a bigger kick in the jewels than a bad evaluation, is when somebody, you hit on this guy and he was right, and CJ Stroud did this and CJ Stroud did that, and he's off to the NFL. And it's like, we weren't exactly ready for him to leave yet.
There is a point there, though, of you don't want this to get to a point where you sign, 4 or 5 five-star quarterbacks and none of them ever end up starting for you while you bring in transfers to play. Like, there is a recruiting component of this that I think is important. And so that is part of why, if you think Julian Sain is ready to play, I think you should play him next year. If he's not ready to play, why isn't he? Like, quarterbacks should be ready to play year 2. If they're not being blocked by an even better one, but it's going to be a little bit concerning, I think, to me, if Sain doesn't play next year. Because eventually it's like, okay, why you keep bringing in these guys? They got to play, right? Like, you got to eventually someone, you get into this national battle with Alabama or Georgia or USC or Texas, and like, why would you go to Ohio State? All their 5-star quarterbacks never play. So there is something to that, but I tend to think Julian Sain is going to be the guy who kind of breaks that little mini streak they're on right now.
If you're not going to start playing the quarterbacks you recruit, why are you recruiting quarterbacks? Why not just go to the portal every year or every 2 years or whatever? And I know that's, I'm throwing a real blunt answer out there, but there's a ton of truth to it. If you're not gonna play your own quarterbacks, then stop recruiting them. Stop wasting time in doing that, and put all that time and effort in getting the next great one who's leaving whatever program or whatever. So, I don't know. Got a couple more left. Mika Hanna, what's up with Philip Bowser?
In terms of?
I just put Mika knows every name in Ohio, so I assume
that. Yeah, they've offered. He's the lineman. They've offered. Look, this is what we're going to see basically go away for the most part. I'm not saying it's going to entirely go away, but for the most part, what we're going to see go away is this like preferred walk-on program, because a lot of schools I think are going to either only go with scholarship players, or it's going to be a very limited, like, let's say you've got 95 guys on your roster and 90 of them are going to be scholarship. You might have 5. Like the days of the 20, 30, 40 man, walk-on brigades are coming to an end. So Philip Bowser is kind of a bridge to that. In past years, Philip Bowser would be a preferred walk-on. But now that you're able to have more than 85 scholarship guys, or you will be, you're able to offer that guy a scholarship and kind of stash him for a couple of years and see if you can develop him. So that's kind of like, I wouldn't get the sense that this is like a guy who's going to be heavily in the mix moving forward, but I think this is more of an extension of a preferred walk-on type of offer. And just now it looks different because you can offer more than 85 scholarships.
Last one in the queue. So if you want to keep us here any longer and keep me from running the Giant Eagle and picking up some prescriptions and stuff.
We do have to wrap this up with some like rib talk, because I'm seeing the banter.
Yeah, I know. Well,
I need to set the record straight a little bit.
I have a pizza in the fridge right now, and I'm like, there's a McDonald's across the street from the Giant Eagle, and I'm struggling with that because I've already had my damn McRib. We already told the story how I got one with no sauce on it, and I was pissed. But to Rick S's comment, one thing we need to look at when it comes to portal recruiting is taking guys that Michigan wants, deprive them. If Michigan wants a guy and we can get him, then do the evaluation and go get him. Now, Michigan's portal plan works sometimes and it doesn't other times. A couple years ago, they did a really good job of hitting the portal and getting offensive line. And I think that a lot of Buckeye fans would sing hallelujah if Ohio State could do that. I also understand the zero-sum game of for every kid you get, that's somebody that your foes can't get. But if you get yourself so caught up in what is going on there, you're going to tie yourself in mental knots. And I don't think that it's a great strategy, in my opinion.
I think there's something to be said for like their evaluations on the O-line and just maybe taking an extra closer look at those guys. But yeah, at the end of the day, you kind of have to trust your own evaluations. But there's no doubt they would like to pull some of these battles from Michigan. I mean, they tried to at the high school level, like Avery Gatch, weren't able to get him this cycle. He went to Michigan kid. So it's something I think to keep back of mind for sure. I wouldn't like be as like literal with it as like, oh, we have to, if they offer him, we have to offer him, go get him. But like, I would absolutely keep an eye on it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I got my McRib.
Yeah, let's have our McRib conversation. Then I got to go. I'm hoping that if I go get these damn prescriptions, one of them will let me actually sleep. So that's my hope. I don't know, but
I got my McRib yesterday.
Uh-huh.
I got 2 of them, no fries, just 2 McRibs, nothing else. We hosted Thanksgiving like we do every year, and I did a big grocery run for that, and then I went to Canton for the state championship. So there was like no food in the house yesterday, and we're sitting around. I'm working, writing stuff up, cutting some video. Got the Eagles on in the background, Philadelphia Eagles, not the band, and just kind of hanging out. And halftime of the Eagles game, I'm like, okay, what are we gonna eat? There's nothing in this house. I'm like, well, the McRibs at McDonald's. So I went and I got a couple McRibs. They were fantastic. They were properly sauced. And now I need to kind of be careful because I've had my 2. I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to, this is how addiction forms. Like, gotta be careful. So I'll probably try and abstain for a while now. We'll see how long McDonald's keeps them available, though, because that could be a battle of willpower there if they keep these things in stock for the next few weeks. But I did get my McRib.
There you go. I mean, there's only one healthy addiction, and that's signing up for BuckeyeHuddle.com, but I digress. We did get a super chat, so we will hit with this so we don't end with McRib talk unless we get a super chat about McRibs. Again, from B-Man, is OSU looking at getting 3 starting O-linemen in the portal, or is that rumor that we do not have anyone in the program ready? Now, said earlier in the show, and I know people come in and out of the show, so I never really get upset about, having to say something again. I think 2 is the number. Now, if you can get 3, if there are 3 that you're like, holy crap, these guys are all great and, potentially could be starters, I don't think you necessarily get away from it. With Miles Walker entering the portal, I don't think that's the last Ohio State offensive lineman to enter the portal. I just don't. So going out and getting these portal guys is one thing. Now, being able to say unequivocally that they're going to be starters, can anybody do that? I mean, if you have that kind of, magic 8 ball, I'd like some lottery numbers or something like that, because we don't know. I mean, we don't know for sure, but I think 2 is the number they have to hit. 3 would be fantastic. But again, you also don't want to sit there and create a point of where Ian Moore and the Armstrong twins and guys like that are not able to develop and grow and find opportunity. But if you don't have guys that are ready and you're having just a problematic offensive line, go out and fix it. You got to fix it because that is too damn important.
Yeah, like I said, Kevin and I are pretty much on the same page here. I think minimum 2, and they'd like to get 3, but that third one, it can't be a reach. I don't think they want to redo the Victor Cutler thing. That just didn't work. So, they want to push the competition in that room as much as possible. I think they feel like they've got 4 or 5 guys coming back that'll be able to do that, maybe even 5 or 6. But you want to have, for me in this day and age, you want to have 8. Having 10 or 11 is unrealistic. You're not going to keep 11 good offensive linemen happy long enough for it to matter. But you got to have 8. You got to have a starting 5. You got to have 2 or 3 backups you really trust. So I think they're going to want 2 starters and then a third guy either as a possible starter or at least to come in and push the young guys, push the competition so that the young guys have to kind of, earn it versus we don't have anyone else. So that I think, is kind of how they're looking at things right now.
We'll wrap up with a couple of things of where people are saying nice things to us. We always like that. Mike Smith, great job to you guys, by the way, on the National Signing Day coverage. You guys worked hard for that one day. We work hard for a lot of days. Thanks for the work. And then another one from CW. Thank you, Kevin and Mark. Good to see you Buckeyes out there. Well, again, we do it because we love, what we do. There are days that it can be a slog and everything else, but we do it for you guys, and you guys are great fans and great supporters, and we appreciate you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank. I know she's posted a few nice things in the chat throughout the afternoon here. I'd like to thank Doreen for her continued support of our site, but what I'd really like to thank her for, shout her out for, is her support of the entire Ohio State podcasting community. She does a lot on social media to, try and get a lot of stuff out there for all of the Ohio State podcasts. And so I know she does a lot to help. And it's one of those things, like, it's funny, like podcast, like everyone thinks of like podcasting as like being hyper competitive. It's really not. It's not like we're fighting for like a 7 p.m. like TV time slot. Like our stuff's on demand. So like you guys can go listen to 3 other podcasts and then listen to ours and just, put them on a playlist or something and listen to them. Everything's on demand on YouTube. So actually, like, it's kind of like a rising tide lifts all boats type of thing where the algorithm will like recognize like, oh, you like this Ohio State podcast. Well, here's this one too. You should check this one. So like the idea that promoting like 4 or 5 different Ohio State podcasts on social media is actually helpful for all of us. So we appreciate everyone's continued support on that front.
I'll jump in with this Tim to Naples thing just because I have a story on it, and then we'll go. Can you guys acquire some Buckeye backdrops? I have a backdrop for Buckeye Grove, previous site. Never used it. I just don't feel right. I mean, first, I'm in my my little kitchen table right now. I'm not necessarily the door behind me is to the garage. I don't think I'm going to set up a backdrop here. I guess I could in my office. I've actually started working in my office again, but might confuse people. It'll be like, I thought Buckeye Grove went away a couple of years ago. But if you go to buckeyegrove.com, it does forward you to Buckeye Huddle. So it would be great. I mean, I have had plans of creating a little studio. Life happens. I have all the equipment. I've had it for 2 years. I just haven't gotten around to setting it up. I mean, but we would love to, to have maybe some better aesthetics or whatever. But for now, you just get to see the bare walls in my, right by my kitchen.
Yeah, so it's funny. I used to have like the virtual backgrounds and I had some different stuff. And I have people be like, well, that just looks fake. It doesn't look authentic or whatever. So it's funny. It's like there's like a 50-50 split. There's like a bunch of people who would like to see like a Buckeye Huddle or some type of Ohio State centric background. There's other people like, well, it's just better when it's just like a natural thing. So I will. I don't like
virtual backgrounds myself.
Right.
Yeah.
But some people like the more natural settings, and then some people are like, they want like the fluffed up, like put a big Buckeye Huddle thing in the back. Like,
if you're not properly lit, it looks bad. Go back and watch the CFP reveal show, and Herb Street had the worst chroma key that I've ever seen. First of all, the background looked like he was on the Death Star, and then they were ready to throw him in the trash compactor, and then the lighting was so bad. So there are some some things that aesthetically that we could try to advance it, and if you don't execute it, it looks worse.
Tell you what, I will do a McRib backdrop if McDonald's sponsors the show. They're gonna have to pay for that product placement.
Yeah, that's that, and it's got. And
we're gonna do a million views this month on our YouTube channel. That is prime real estate. Hey,
and they can't pay us in McRibs. They can't pay us in McRibs.
Cash.
I'm already,
cash
my diet is already bad enough. I'm hanging on by a freaking thread. I think we're good though. We're caught up. So
I got to do my Big Ten show with Chip here. We're going to recap the Big Ten championship game. We're going to talk about the playoff reveal and kind of which programs got screwed. I would say one of them is a program that we talk about quite frequently on this channel in the playoff rankings, and which one got a gift. So we'll have that up here tonight, kind of breaking down the Big Ten angle of the playoffs. But head over to BuckeyeHuddle.com. If you have more questions, I'll get you there as well. I have my chat tomorrow. But if you have something tonight, I can always jump on there, obviously, and answer it. But I'll have my all-day chat tomorrow as well on the website. So look for that as well over on the website. But again, thank you everyone again for watching and listening. This should be a regular here on Monday afternoons. We had a 1-week hiatus last week because of all the signing day craziness. But we'll be back again next Monday for the live show. And I think we'll have a couple of recorded ones in the meantime as well. So thanks again for watching and listening, and we'll see you again very soon.